Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a pretty special one. I'm finally going to be showing you my US licensed complete NES set. But in addition to that, I want to help new collectors that are thinking about going for a set really understand what my journey was like by sharing some tips that helped me along the way that will hopefully help you as well. Let's get into it. Well, there she is. There's the collection. So now let's pivot into some tips and tricks that will maybe help you on your collecting journey. Now, it took me around 15 years or so to actually finish my set. I finished it in around 2022, I believe it was August. So that being said, is that my first tip is that this is a marathon. It is not a sprint. This is gonna take time. Most of us are not independently wealthy, so we're not gonna go out and be able to just buy any game that we see. If you're like me, you're doing this on a budget, and that's perfectly okay. But remember, it's gonna take time, and you're gonna get frustrated, and that's okay. I spent many years frustrated. I even took a break for a long time. I guess that's tip 1.5. Don't be afraid to take a break from collecting for a while. This is gonna be a long process, but I promise you, if you hang tight, when you finally complete that collection, you are absolutely going to love it. And that brings me to my next tip, which is a really important one. Do your research. Before you just jump out and start buying games willy-nilly, you really need to do some research and understand what it is you're really getting into. It helps you understand things like, what are some of the more sought after games? How expensive is this going to be? How do I spot fakes? What are the different variants? What does a full set really look like? For example, in the NES world, there's several different things that define a set. You have a complete full set with everything. You have a US licensed set. You have a US licensed retail set. Doing your research will also help you figure out what is your definition of done. For me, it was a licensed US retail set, meaning it had to be sold at a store, but it was -1 game, which was stadium events. Now, I did end up getting a PAL one, which is much cheaper, and for me, that worked. I'm completely satisfied with this, but you may not be. So by doing your research, you'll be able to better understand what your definition of complete is. Not only should your research include the actual set you're going for, but research the stores around you. Do they have good trade-in policies? Do they ever run deals? Being in the know about what your local stores do for trade-in or deals will help you be able to pick up some games, whether they be heavy hitters or smaller titles, at a much cheaper price, which will help you in the long run. Another thing that I would suggest is try to find games in the wild when you can. Now, if you're someone like me, this may mean you may have to travel a bit. It's worth doing the extra travel to build good relationships with shops. And there's just something so satisfying about finding a game that you've been looking for in the wild. Plus, it supports local retro stores. We need more retro stores. So if you can, try to find your games in the wild. There's absolutely nothing wrong with eBay. I've eBayed several games myself, and I've bought multiple games from people offline, but I've always tried to find games in the wild and support local retro shops when I can. The next tip I have for you guys is set small, attainable goals for yourself. Collecting an entire set of something is a huge goal, but breaking it down into small, attainable goals will make it a lot less frustrating. It'll give you some wins and milestones to celebrate. For example, one thing that I did was first I went after all the black box games for the NES. Then I went for the Capcom games and then the Konami games. And by breaking it down into small, attainable goals, I felt like I was accomplishing something even though I hadn't quite hit my end goal yet. Another thing that I would do is I would celebrate every 100th game. I would always try to make every 100th game something special. For example, game 400 for me was Little Samson, which is one of the most expensive titles on the NES. The reason that this stood out for me was because by being able to actually acquire this game, it made the end goal feel real to me. Because before this, I was having doubts, right? I still got Little Samson left. I still have this game left. I'm never going to get there. But getting this guy right here made the whole thing real. And if I hadn't got this game when I did, I probably would have given up, to be honest with you. The next tip that I have for you guys is utilize social media. Now, I know social media is a cesspool, especially Twitter these days. But if you're like me and you live in a town where there's not a lot of access to games, social media can really, really be a help. Another thing that it does is it helps you network with other people that are just as passionate as you are, especially whenever you reach one of those small milestones like I talked about before when setting small goals. Use social media to celebrate those wins. I promise you, people are going to celebrate with you. We love seeing more people get into this hobby. Sure, you're gonna have some trolls, you're gonna have some crappy people, but I promise you they're the minority in the collecting world. And the use of social media also leads into my next tip, which is show off your collection. It does not matter how big your collection is. It can be 10 games, 100 games, or 1,000 games. Your collection is special to you, and that makes it awesome. I personally love seeing people post their collections when they're just starting out, because I miss those days, man, when I could go and hunt for games and when every store I walked into had a game that I needed. So please show that collection off, man. Be proud of it. Your collection is awesome. Honestly, I wish I had started using social media way sooner than I did. Through social media, I was able to help other collectors complete their sets with extra games that I had. And had it not been for those Facebook groups and Instagram, I would have never completed my set. And the last tip I'm gonna give is you don't have to listen to anything that I've just said this entire video. Now, I know that sounds really weird considering I just spent X amount of minutes giving you all these tips for collecting, but what I mean by that is that ultimately this is your journey. The stuff that I've shared here today is stuff that worked for me. It may not work for you. It's like a wise man that I know always says, collect and play your way. How you choose to get to your goal is ultimately up to you. Well guys, we're about to wrap this one up. I hope you found this video informative and hopefully it helps you on your collecting journey. If you have any questions, please let me know. Or if there's anything you have questions about my collection that you want to see more of, drop a comment and I'll be happy to talk about it. That's gonna do it for this video. We'll catch you in the next one.